There is a war inside Buckingham Palace, and it has nothing to do with Harry or Meghan. It began quietly, as these things always do inside the British monarchy, with a disagreement so apparently small that outsiders who heard the details might have wondered why anyone involved was treating it as a crisis. A tiara, a wedding, a bride who was told no by a woman who believed the no was hers to give. Prince William did not accept the no. He overruled it. He told Camilla, the Queen Consort, that she had exceeded her authority, and he did so not through careful diplomatic language or measured palace protocol, but with the directness of a man who had been holding a great deal back for a very long time. What followed was not a disagreement. It was a war over protocol and power, over a sick king's schedule and who gets to decide it, over the future direction of an institution that has only one clear heir and a queen who is not ready to stand aside from the position she spent decades fighting to secure. And now Queen Camilla has gone to King Charles and reportedly demanded that he punish his own son. Before we go any further, please make sure you subscribe so you never miss a single royal update. On the 6th of June, 2026, Peter Phillips, the son of Princess Anne, the King's nephew, and one of Prince William's closest cousins, married Harriet Spurling at All Saints' Church in Kemble, Gloucestershire. It was, by royal standards, a relatively modest occasion. Peter Phillips holds no royal title. Harriet Spurling is a paediatric nurse, a woman whose background, whose career, and whose life before entering the royal orbit had nothing to do with palaces, protocols, or the centuries-old customs that govern the British monarchy's relationship with its own history. The wedding was held near Gatcombe Park, Princess Anne's private estate, and the guest list was a careful selection of family members, including King Charles, Queen Camilla, Prince William, Princess Catherine, and Princess Anne herself. Prince Harry was not invited. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was not invited. The day had been designed, according to those who helped arrange it, as a rare opportunity for the family to gather around something uncomplicated, a celebration rather than a crisis, a moment of warmth in a period that had contained very little of it. What happened in the days before the ceremony made that intention impossible to sustain. The question of the tiara emerged several weeks before the wedding date. Harriet Spurling had expressed a wish to wear a piece from the royal jewellery collection, a tradition with clear precedent within the extended family. Peter Phillips's first wife, Autumn Kelly, had worn Princess Anne's festoon tiara at their 2008 wedding. Zara Tyndall, Peter's sister, had worn the same mother's meander tiara at her 2011 wedding to Mike Tyndall. The pattern was established. The family connection was direct. The request, by any reasonable reading of the customs governing these occasions, was entirely appropriate. Queen Camilla disagreed. According to sources cited by multiple royal correspondents, including accounts published by Radar Online, New Idea, and Closer magazine, Camilla's office blocked Harriet's request to access the royal jewellery collection. The Queen's position, as reported by the Royal Insider Network and subsequently confirmed by additional sources, was that Harriet Spurling did not come from an aristocratic background and was not part of the royal bloodline, and that on those grounds, access to the family collection was not appropriate for a woman entering the family through a second marriage between two non-titled individuals. The argument had a certain technical logic to it. Protocol is protocol. The royal collection is not a lending library. And Camilla, as Queen Consort, occupied a position that gave her legitimate authority over certain ceremonial and institutional matters. She believed this was one of them. William did not believe that at all. The Prince of Wales, who has known Peter Phillips his entire life, and who shares with his cousin the particular bond of two people who grew up navigating the extraordinary pressures of royal proximity without the full weight of royal expectation, was described by sources as furious when he learned of Camilla's decision. An insider quoted by Radar Online captured the substance of his reaction with notable directness. William, the source said, was disgusted that Camilla would try to stir up trouble on his wedding day just to show off her power. That phrase, just to show off her power, was the one that defined how William read the situation. He did not see a Queen Consort exercising legitimate protocol authority. He saw a woman using an institutional position to make a statement at the expense of his cousin's happiness on the most significant day of his personal life. William intervened. He stepped in and challenged Camilla's decision. He argued that it was not Camilla's role to police royal heirlooms, and that his cousin, as a member of the extended family with a direct bloodline connection to Princess Anne, had every right to at least be offered the option. Harriet Spurling, caught between two senior royals in open disagreement on the eve of her own wedding, chose the most graceful exit available. She wore a tiara owned by Pragnell, the jewellers who had made her engagement ring, borrowed from their private collection rather than from the family vault. The decision, as one insider observed, spoke more about her diplomacy than about either William or Camilla winning. But someone had won, or rather someone had been seen to lose. Camilla had issued a decision, William had overturned it. In the careful language of royal protocol, that was not simply a family disagreement, it was a challenge to authority. And Camilla, according to sources who spoke to multiple publications in the aftermath, was still furious long after the wedding day itself had passed. She accused William of purposely undermining her and breaking protocol. She described his intervention as arrogant, and she took the matter somewhere that no palace dispute should ever be taken if the people involved hoped to resolve it quietly. She took it to the king. The tiara dispute would have been damaging enough on its own, but it did not exist in isolation. It was the visible surface of a conflict that had been building for months, a conflict rooted not in jewellery or wedding protocol, but in something far more serious and far more personal. King Charles has been undergoing treatment for cancer since 2024. The palace has managed the disclosure of his condition with characteristic caution, acknowledging the diagnosis, providing periodic updates on his treatment, and maintaining a public schedule for the monarch that has been, by any reasonable assessment, remarkably demanding for a man in his circumstances. State banquets, official engagements, international visits. The apparatus of monarchy, turning without pause, carried forward by a man who has spent his entire adult life understanding that the institution does not stop for personal difficulty. Prince William has watched this schedule with increasing alarm. According to multiple sources cited by Radar Online, William has been urging his father to ease off his public duties and take a genuine step back to focus on his health. The concern is real, not strategic, not political, but the concern of a son who is watching a parent push himself harder than the circumstances justify, and who believes that the people around that parent are not doing enough to protect him from himself. The people around Charles, in William's assessment, are led by Camilla. The Queen Consort has taken a consistent position on Charles's public schedule, one that prioritises the visibility of the monarchy, the management of its public reputation, and the signal sent to the world when a king continues his duties in the face of serious illness. In Camilla's view, according to sources close to the situation, the appearances are necessary. The scrutiny surrounding the family is intense. A king who retreats from public view during a period of institutional pressure sends a message that the monarchy cannot afford to send. Visibility, for Camilla, is protection of Charles, of the crown, and of the position she herself occupies within it. William does not agree. The disagreement came to a head during the state banquet at Windsor Castle, held in honour of Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the First Lady in March 2026. The event was a significant diplomatic occasion, one of those moments when the ceremonial weight of the monarchy is deployed in service of international relationships that extend far beyond the palace itself. Charles attended, Camilla attended, William and Catherine attended. William, according to insiders who spoke to Radar Online and People magazine, did not believe his father should have been there at all. Sources quoted by People magazine described the specific dynamic with unusual precision. William, the source revealed, did not feel Charles was well enough to attend. He had urged his father to rest. Camilla had insisted they both needed to be present, particularly given the scrutiny the family was already under. The argument between them was described as a huge argument, not a polite difference of opinion handled through the usual channels of royal diplomacy, but an actual confrontation, the kind that leaves marks. In the end, Charles attended, and the result, from William's perspective, was exactly what he had feared. An insider told Radar Online that afterward, all anyone talked about was how unwell Charles looked. The state banquet, far from demonstrating the king's resilience and continuity, had instead provided the world with a public image of a man visibly struggling, an image that reinforced every concern about his health rather than dispersing them. William's fears had been publicly validated in the worst possible way, on an international stage, in front of diplomatic guests, with cameras documenting exactly what he had tried to prevent. His anger was not directed at his father. It was directed at the woman he believed had prioritised the institution's image over the king's physical well-being. A source quoted by Radar Online described William's position in terms that left little ambiguity. William was furious, the source said, that Camilla seemed to care more about promoting herself and protecting her position than she did about protecting Charles. That accusation, that Camilla's insistence on the king's continued public schedule was motivated not by genuine concern for the monarchy, but by the protection of her own status within it, was the most damaging thing that could be said about her. And William, whether or not he had articulated it in those exact words, was understood by those around him to believe it. The conflict had moved from the practical question of how much Charles should be doing to the deeper and more dangerous question of Camilla's motivations. That transition, from disagreement over a schedule to suspicion about intent, marked the point at which a family dispute became something significantly harder to resolve. To understand why the conflict between William and Camilla carries the weight that it does, it is necessary to understand the history beneath it, a history that predates the tiara, the Nigerian banquet, and every other recent flashpoint by several decades. William was 12 years old when his parents' marriage collapsed publicly and permanently. He was 15 when his mother died in a Paris tunnel and the world watched him walk behind her coffin through the streets of London. He was a young man still shaped by grief when his father's relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, the woman many people, including William himself, had long associated with the destruction of his parents' marriage, was formalised into something the institution could no longer ignore. The history between William and Camilla has never been simple. There were years when palace advisors worked carefully to construct a visible warmth between them, to show a stepson and a stepmother building something workable from the ruins of what had come before. Those efforts achieved something, but they did not achieve everything. And reports that have surfaced over the years suggest that beneath the carefully managed public relationship, William has carried a set of unresolved feelings about Camilla that the passage of time has softened but never fully resolved. Sources cited by multiple publications, including Stylecaster and Radar Online, indicate that the current conflict has reignited what insiders describe as unresolved resentment, feelings that William has never entirely put away, and that the specific nature of the current dispute has brought back to the surface with uncomfortable force. Camilla, in William's view, as reported by sources close to him, is not simply a stepmother or a queen consort who happens to disagree with him on matters of palace management. She is a woman who entered the family under circumstances that caused irreparable damage to people William loved, and who now occupies a position from which she can influence the health decisions of a sick king, in ways that William believes are driven by self-interest rather than genuine care. That belief, whether or not it is fair, whether or not it reflects the full complexity of Camilla's actual motivations, is the emotional foundation beneath every public dispute. The tiara was not really about a tiara. The Nigerian banquet was not really about a state dinner. They were about something older and deeper and more painful, the accumulated weight of a relationship that has never been, and may never be, fully resolved. King Charles understands this. According to sources cited by Stylecaster, Charles has been begging William to agree to treat Camilla with basic respect after his death, a request that implies Charles knows, with the clarity of a man who has lived with both of them for decades, that the relationship between his wife and his heir is more fragile than any public appearance has ever suggested. The fact that Charles felt the need to make that request to his son about his wife tells its own story about the dynamics inside the family he has spent his reign trying to hold together. The moment the palace war crossed into genuinely dangerous territory came when Queen Camilla reportedly went to King Charles with a demand that should not have needed to be made at all. According to sources cited by IB Times UK and Closer magazine, Camilla has urged Charles to take action against William, to take him down a peg, in the language reported by multiple publications, and to address what she described as his arrogance in overriding her decisions and undermining her authority within the family and the institution. The phrase "take down a peg," if accurate, reveals everything about the nature of the conflict as Camilla experiences it. She does not, in this framing, see herself as a woman in disagreement with her stepson over matters of judgment. She sees herself as a queen whose authority has been publicly challenged by a subordinate, a man who, however powerful his future position may be, does not yet hold the throne, and therefore has no right to act as though he does. That framing is where the conflict becomes genuinely irresoluble, because from William's perspective, he is not a subordinate, he is the heir to the throne, the future king, the man who will one day inherit every responsibility and every burden that the crown carries, including the responsibility of managing whatever consequences flow from decisions being made right now. He is not challenging Camilla's authority out of arrogance. He is protecting his father out of love and protecting the institution out of the particular urgency of a man who understands that everything happening in the palace today will shape the monarchy he eventually leads. Two people in genuine conflict. Two positions that are not simply different but structurally incompatible. And a king, ill and exhausted and caught between them, who has reportedly tried to manage the situation by reminding William in private conversations to leave Camilla alone, while also understanding, with a father's particular grief, why his son cannot do that. Camilla's demand that Charles act against William placed the king in an impossible position. To side with Camilla was to side against his son, to validate her authority at the expense of an heir whose judgment, in several of the specific cases under dispute, the king privately respected. To side with William was to undermine the woman he had married, the queen who had stood beside him through his cancer treatment, the partner whose presence at his public engagements had been, whatever the conflicts it caused, a visible demonstration that the monarchy was not facing this period alone. Charles, according to sources close to the situation, has not issued any formal rebuke of William. He has not given Camilla the formal institutional vindication she sought. What he has done, in the manner characteristic of a man who has spent his entire life navigating the space between personal feeling and institutional duty, is continue to attend his engagements, to manage his relationships as carefully as declining health and competing demands allow, and to hope, in the way that people hope when the alternatives are too painful to consider, that the people around him will find a way to manage a conflict that he cannot resolve for them. While the war between William and Camilla has dominated the internal landscape of the palace, Princess Catherine has occupied a position that those around her describe as both essential and extraordinarily difficult. Kate has been standing firmly alongside William throughout the entirety of this conflict. According to sources cited by OK magazine, she has been drawn into an endless cycle of meetings, conversations, and debates that have dragged on for months without any real sense of resolution. She has attended the discussions. She has listened to the arguments. She has supported her husband's position while managing, with the particular skill that has defined her public and private role since her marriage, the emotional temperature of situations that carry the constant risk of generating the kind of heat that burns people. But Kate has her own relationship with Camilla, one that has, according to sources, become increasingly strained over the same period that William and Camilla's conflict has intensified. Reports published by OK magazine in early 2026 indicated that insiders were describing the relationship between Kate and Camilla as open warfare, a phrase that suggested the tension had moved well beyond the kind of friction that palace life routinely generates, and into something that the people closest to both women were finding almost impossible to contain. The specific flashpoint for Kate and Camilla's deteriorating relationship was traced by insiders to the state visit of Donald Trump and Melania Trump to Britain, an event that generated its own set of internal pressures and in which, sources suggested, the precise question of precedence, visibility, and institutional positioning had created friction between the Princess of Wales and the Queen Consort. The details of what specifically occurred during that visit remain closely held. But the suggestion that Camilla had taken a very dim view of the Wales's behaviour, that she felt they had inserted themselves forcefully into institutional matters that were not theirs to control, captures the broader dynamic that has defined the relationship between the two couples. Catherine's position is made more complicated by the